Day in and day out, all throughout the year, the soils in our garden have to deal with a lot. And even during the growing season, when we're producing amazing veg like this cauliflower here. Intense, relentless heat, prolonged drought, rainstorms out of nowhere, and all the poking and prodding by diligent gardeners like us. There's no question that by the end of a long growing season, our soils have earned a well-deserved break. And not just any old break, more like a trip to the spa for the ultimate recharge. I know I've said it many times before, but soils are the lifeblood of our garden. And without a healthy profile below the ground, what you grow above it will always be subpar. So today, with the weather doing its thing, I've got 6 ways that we can build better soils over winter, so that when spring hits next year, we can plant full well, knowing that it's going to be our best year yet. Outside of pots and small containers, the soils in our garden are a living, breathing resource. And like everything else that's alive, it needs 4 basic things to exist: food, water, air, and shelter. Without these things in the right amounts, at the right ratio, soils die, and they become much less effective at growing plants, let alone producing a viable harvest. At around 45 degrees Fahrenheit and below, soil microorganisms slow right down and go dormant. So, the best thing that we can do to build a better soil is to go into protection mode. Yes, building soils is why we're here today, but to get there, we have to protect them first. And the first rule of protection is to do no harm ourselves. We start that by not disturbing or digging the soil. Like at all. Not even a little bit. Sure, late season carrot and beet harvests are unavoidable. But directly and purposefully turning or tilling our gardens, especially in the fall, is a definite no-no. The onslaught of fall rains and winter snows can no doubt have the opposite effect of what this time of year is supposed to do for our soils, and that's to recharge them. Soils use this dormancy period to rebuild themselves. Crops take net nutrients out all season long, and then especially when we harvest them. And those extensive root systems break down the structure and the integrity of the soil profile. Add in beating rains and exposure, and we have a recipe for soil degradation year over year. It's one of those things where simply doing nothing at all will have a more beneficial impact than actively managing or messing around with it. Continuing on with that level of beneficial neglect, we have weed removal, or in this case, non-removal. I know it sounds counterproductive, but leave all those visible weeds intact. They'll stabilize, bind, and protect your soils over winter without asking anything in return. Sort of a built-in cover crop, if you will. Your winter weeds are going to act as natural soil protectors, and the deep-rooted ones like this dandelion here are going to help with drainage and structure when the soil needs it the most. Smother those weeds in the spring with new crops and a thick mulch, and they'll break down quickly as the weather warms up, nourishing both your plants and your soil. And speaking of that mulch, this might be the most important thing you do, as this stuff is going to both protect and build your soils. Whenever we want to sustainably build soils, it's always best to look at what nature does first. And we don't have to look any further than the annual fall leaf drop. Every autumn, some of the best free mulch becomes available in the form of fallen leaves. Intrinsically by design, a natural blanket that protects the soil from both erosion and exposure. And we see examples of it all around us every year. But when we chop those leaves up just a little bit, make them a little bit finer, we still get the mulching properties, yes, but also a soil building block that breaks down fast, becoming the next year's layer of topsoil. Leaves are a great free one, yes, but it doesn't stop there. All organic mulches can be used in this fashion. Grass clippings, fine straw, yard trimmings, and even old crops, and especially combinations of these things. They break down over winter, becoming the next layers of soil. This is a big one. Yes, mulch protects like we said, but by also breaking down and becoming soil itself, this means it's doubly as effective. Taking it a step further, fall is also the perfect time to spread out the stuff that's already broken down. That's right, we're talking about that black gold compost, and fall is a perfect time of year to finally deploy it. Top dressing your beds with organic matter that has already been broken down is a very effective way to recharge your garden soils at the end of a long growing season. Simply spread it out right on top either before you put your mulch down or as a layer of mulch itself. No need to dig it in or mix it with the existing soil. Just lay it right on top, nice and evenly, and let the compost do its thing. All on its own, without any help from us, it's going to continue to break down and slowly release nutrients and microbes back into the soil where we need it the most. Growers often talk about amending their soils. Compost added to your garden in the late fall is quite likely the most effective amendment that you will ever use. And speaking of amending, you coastal gardeners are really gonna love this one. That's right, we're talking seaweed. And if you're lucky enough to live in the right location, it's one of the best amendments you can possibly use. Now, most people think about it in the spring, but it's the fall application that hits the hardest. Let me show you what I mean. Seaweed and other floating algae have been used for centuries as a valuable garden amendment as well as a mulch. Absolutely teeming with beneficial trace elements and minerals, these free-floating marine plants are a broad-spectrum, slow-release nutrient store like no other. In addition to the 17 essential plant macro and micronutrients, seaweed also contains natural growth hormones. This stuff is going to boost your spring crops like crazy. Unlike a lot of our other amendments, this stuff is completely weed and weed seed free. Not to mention, the application is super simple. For soil building as well as protection, lay it on a few layers thick, just like you would any other mulch. Extremely high in carbohydrates, while being surprisingly low in cellulose, means that your seaweed top layers are going to be completely broken down into the top layers of soil come springtime. Brilliant. And lastly, our sixth and final way to build better soils in your garden over winter are living mulches, otherwise known as cover crops. Cover crops, such as this fall rye here, are the ultimate in soil protection as well as building. Fast sprouting and even quicker rooting, these specialized plants quickly stabilize a loose exposed soil. The list of their benefits are many. First, they eliminate any topsoil erosion over fall and winter. Next, with that network root system, they improve soil stability as well as structure. Just by actively growing, they also improve soil microbial activity and thus the nutrient storage ability. They'll smother noxious weeds, and cover crops even prevent pests from laying eggs and finding places to hide over winter. But it's the soil building and the soil protection that we're truly after, and cover crops are simply the best at it. Sow your cover crops right at the surface, right up until about a week before your first fall frost. Grow them over winter and cut them down the following spring right to the soil level just before they go to seed. And that works out nicely because it'll be right in time for your spring plantings. Soil building and soil protection are necessary for continued gardening success over multiple seasons. I realize we covered a lot here today, so let's recap those main points to make sure that it all sticks. During the growing season, our soils put in the long hours. even more than we do. And come fall and winter time, they just need a rest. Time to rebuild and recharge so that we can do it all again the following spring. Thus, soil building is one of the most important things that we can do for our gardens. But before we do that, we must protect them first. This starts with not doing any damage ourselves. No digging or exposing those top layers. Heck, we can even leave the weeds in place to act as a makeshift cover crop for some added protection. Now, to bridge that gap between protecting and building our soils, we have mulching. A nice thick mulch layer is going to protect our soils all winter long from exposure, extreme temperatures, frost heaving, drying out, and just general wear and tear. There's a reason that nature does it automatically every autumn. Choosing fine, organic mulches that break down easily is not only going to mimic nature and do all of those things, it's also going to turn into the next layers of soil itself. Skipping ahead a step is just to put those broken down materials, i.e. your compost, directly on your beds, which works great if you have enough available. You coastal growers have an added advantage of being able to use seaweed as a mulch. Containing all 17 essential plant nutrients, seaweed is the ultimate booster for tired soils. Simply lay it on thick and let it dissolve into your garden over the winter. Finally, we have living mulches, otherwise known as cover crops. Specialized plants such as clover, alfalfa, and fall rye that grow fast to bind the soil while giving it a thick layer of living armor. On top of suppressing weeds and warding off pests, this stuff builds soil like no other. Cover crops almost always leave your garden better off than before they were planted, and I've never been disappointed when utilizing them. We try to cultivate the best soils, so in turn, they can cultivate the best harvests. Protecting and then building up our garden soils over the dormancy of winter is one of the best things that we can do to ensure this. Hopefully the 6 things we covered here today make sense, and you can start your own soil building this winter. Hey, happy growing, guys, and I'll see you soon. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate the support more than you know. And if you're getting value from these videos, please like and share them to spread the word and help your fellow gardener to grow better.